Okay, this video is going to be about integers, and it's going to be regarding comparing and absolute value. Just understanding how to compare integers and then also understanding what absolute value is. First, let's make sure we understand our inequality signs. We have the one on the left, that is the greater than symbol. Is greater than is actually what it means. And the other one is less than. And sometimes kids forget this. Here's a couple tricks to remember. Just look at the one on the left, the greater than sign. Kind of looks like part of a G, if you really want to pretend. And then also the is less than sign. It kind of looks like a sideways L. So if you just put the little ESS in there, it kind of looks like the word less. So is less than. So now we're going to talk about comparing. We've got a number line, and then we've got the 5 and the -4, and we're going to fill in the blank in between using a greater than, less than, or equal to sign. You want to imagine both of them are on a number line. So you've got your -4, you've got your 5. The number that's on the right is the one that's going to be greater. So probably in elementary school you had the inequality sign eat the number that's larger. So you're going to want to eat the 5. So when you read this entire statement from left to right, you read it as 5 is greater than -4. So let's try another one. We've got -5 and -4 this time. So if you put them both on the number line, the -4 is the number that's on the right, and that is the one that you would be greater, so that's the one you'd want to eat. Now when reading this statement from left to right, you're going to read it as -5 is less than -4. So now we have 6 compared to -6. Some of you may have already caught on that as soon as you see a positive number compared to a negative number, the positive number is always going to be the greater one. So if we put them on the number line, though, it follows the same rules. The one on the right is the +6. We're going to eat the +6. So you would read that as 6 is greater than -6.
So we have a -6 and a +6 now. Same problem, but we just changed the numbers, or we changed the order of them. So once again, we're going to eat the +6. So when you read this one from left to right, -6 is less than 6. So let's do a few. This would be a good point to pause the video, try these out on your own, and then turn it back on. So for this first one, we have -3 and +2. You're going to eat the positive number. You'd read that as -3 is less than 2. So now we have -3 and -2. Looks a lot like the problem above. Let's see if anything changes when you make your +2 negative. So for this one, if you put them both on a number line, -2 would still be on the right. So you'd still want to eat that guy. So you'd read this as -3 is less than -2. So up here we have a +4 compared to a -1. The 4 is positive versus the negative. You're going to want to eat the positive. So you'd read that as 4 is greater than -1. Now let's change that +4 to a -4, and let's see if that changes anything. Well, the number that would be on the right now, if you put these on a number line, would be the -1. So you'd want to eat that one, and you'd read this as -4 is less than -1. So now we're going to talk about absolute value. The official definition of absolute value is a number's distance from 0. Absolute value is a number's distance from 0. How far is it? It's always going to end up being positive. So let's check a couple of these out. So we have these bars around the -4. That means the absolute value of -4 is, and then whatever it works out to. We're going to find -4 on the number line. We're going to see how far it is from 0. And it is 4 away from 0. It's 4 steps away, or 4 units away, however you want to look at it. So the absolute value of -4 is 4. Let's do a few more of these. So now we have the absolute value of 3. Now some kids will say, oh, it's -3, you just take the opposite, but that is not the case. You don't do that. You want to think of 3 on the number line, and then how far is it from 0? How many steps would you take? It would take 3 steps. So the absolute value of 3 is 3. That can get confusing. Just make sure whenever you're working these out, the absolute value bar always makes whatever's inside come out positive. So now we have the absolute value of negative 7. So hey, negative 7 is 7 away from 0. So the absolute value of negative 7 is 7. Now we have the absolute value of 5. How far is 5 away from 0? It is 5 away from 0. So the absolute value of 5 is 5. And there you go. So now we're going to just look at a couple different problems using comparing, but now we're going to start dealing with absolute value with these comparisons. So over here we have the 5 and the negative 8. We don't have any absolute value bar, so we don't have to worry about changing anything. The positive number is going to be larger, so you'd read that as 5 is greater than negative 8. Over here we do have some absolute value bars. So before you want to think about comparing, I'd recommend you write out whatever's inside the absolute value, work that part out. So the 5 stays the same, but the absolute value of negative 8 is positive 8. So the absolute value of negative 8 is positive 8. So now you're going to compare those. 5 would be less than 8, so 5 is less than the absolute value of negative 8. So we have this next one, negative 6, negative 2. Neither of them have absolute value bars, so you'd rather eat the negative 2. If you want to think of it as owing people money, negative numbers is like owing people money, you'd rather owe $2 than $6. So you'd read this as negative 6 is less than negative 2. Then over here we have absolute value bars around them both, so they're both going to come out of their positive. So now we have a 6 compared to 2, which actually is greater. So the absolute value of negative 6 is greater than the absolute value of negative 2. So now we have a bunch of 8s, some negative 8s, some positive 8s. If you want, pause it, try this out on your own. So over here, we have a negative 8 and a positive 8. And the positive is always going to be greater, so you would read this as negative 8 is less than 8. Now over on the right side, both of those numbers are going to come out as positive 8s. So 8 is equal to 8, so you'd put an equal sign in there. So the absolute value of negative 8 is equal to the absolute value of 8. So if they're both the same distance from 0, they have the same absolute value. Alright, final part of this video. Positive numbers will always be greater than, less than, or equal to negative numbers. Positive numbers will always be which one of those symbols? It's going to be greater than. Positive numbers will always be to the right on a number line compared to negative numbers. You'd rather, if you want to think of it as money, positive would be having money, negative would be owing money. You'd rather have money. So it's always going to be more. Alright, finally, a positive number will always, sometimes, or never be greater than the absolute value of a negative number. A positive number will always, sometimes, or never be greater than the absolute value of a negative number. That's actually going to be sometimes. I'm going to give you two different scenarios. First of all, over here we have 5 compared to the absolute value of negative 3. Well, when you work it out, negative 3, its absolute value is 3, so 5 compared to 3, 5 would be greater. Over on the right, though, when you take the absolute value of negative 7, that comes out positive, as a positive 7, so 5 compared to positive 7 would be less. So 5 would be less than the absolute value of negative 7. Alright, that's about it. Hope it helps.